welcome our audience to another episode of the K-12 Change Equation. We come together on a bi-weekly basis with change agents across the country who are driving change at the federal, state, and local level. And this project was really inspired by the moment in time in January where there was all this uncertainty, and there continues to be, about what's going to happen with K-12 education and where do we need to go and how are we going to fund it, and, wrestling with the purpose of education and how to serve the next generation of our students. And it's been a privilege for me to be on this show with Mort over the past 8 months. Shawn, I have a surprise. This is also my farewell episode. And so I am going to be departing Education Elements and saying farewell to the K-12 Change Equation audience. I am not going far, and folks will continue to see me out in the field with my next venture. But this is important work. And I, thought it was fitting, as I realized I was going to say goodbye to the audience today, about transition and the transitions that you've gone through. So I am going to throw us a little bit of a curveball to talk about transition and how to navigate that in leadership. Before I do that, I want to share a little bit about you to our audience who doesn't know you as well as Mort and I do. So Mort, I would love for you to layer onto this how you know Shawn. Shawn, I had the privilege of working with you in previous roles, both my own previous roles and some of your previous roles. And, the way that I describe you when talking to folks is you are truly a distinguished leader, scholar, and advocate for those who work in K-12 education and the people that we serve. And you have relentlessly focused your career on equity, inclusion, and instructional momentum. And, I think about your journey. I know you were an English teacher, and I, was working with you at Metro Nashville Public Schools, and also had the privilege of partnering with you on the Urban School Superintendent's Academy that you were running with AASA, and the list just goes on of all the accolades that we could highlight today. But I wanted to give our audience just a little bit of background. I have to say, personally, I've always admired your leadership and having the privilege of being proximate to it, and also at times watching it from a distance. The way that you can just be steadfast in hard times is really something as a fellow leader that I admire in you. So thank you for your leadership, and thank you for coming back into the game.
I know it. Hey, Shawn, I got to give you like a little bit more of a personal insight besides all the formal pieces that they covered. When Joe Harrison and I created the Urban Superintendent's Academy, it was when Skype was the standard, and Joe and I had these really busy schedules. So we agreed to meet at 7:00 in the morning on Skype. I don't know if you've heard me tell this story, but Joe used to come to the meetings in his pajamas. And you and I, we all love Joe Harrison.
We did.
He was just a remarkable brother in so many ways.
Yeah.
To me, and a leader and a mentor, and to thousands and thousands of people out there.
Yeah.
But so now here's the personal connection to you. I just had all these flashbacks of the times when you and I are on the same screen with the Urban Superintendent's Academy.
Yes.
And this is a combination. Let's see, in the airport, in a hotel room, in giving a presentation, and sometimes in a t-shirt, sometimes in a sweatshirt.
Right.
I don't ever remember you in a tie, but I always remember the steadfast piece that Layla just said.
Yes.
You were constant. And so I want to commend you from the pajamas of Joe Harrison, who I love dearly, to working with you, and you were always present. You always showed up wherever you were traveling. And I think you ought to be commended for that through line of supporting leaders, of working hard, regardless of pajamas or t-shirt or wearing a tie. It didn't matter, because what you wore was service and commitment to others. And you continue to do that. And so thank you for being part of this program. And one more story, Layla. I won't go into this in too much of detail. The first time I met Shawn was in Nashville. We hosted the AASA SEL cohort in Nashville. And Shawn was going through some transition, and he was graceful. He was gracious. He was professional, and greeted. That was one of our large meetings with SEL with probably 140, 150 people from across
Yeah,
the
a lot
country.
of people. Yes,
And you were terrific, Shawn. I think I've said that to you before,
thank
but so it has been an honor to work with you since that first moment you stood in front of the SEL cohort under really trying times for you, to seeing you smile so broadly today in Prince George's County. I hope I hope that the state of Maryland knows how lucky they are to have you as a leader. So welcome, Shawn. It's just a delight to see you again.
I'm lucky to be in Prince George's County, serving 132,000 kids. I mean, what, God doesn't give you that type of honor without, knowing you've just got to take a moment and be thankful, for it. But it's been, I mean, more, you are one of the giants in education. I mean, you have been so thoughtful throughout your career, and you've, like Joe Harrison, I mean, have helped hundreds of sitting superintendents, and I'm sure your phone still gets blown up daily. Just to want to get some insight from you and fresh perspective on some of the challenging problems that we face in public education today. And Layla, congratulations on your transition. I know you'll reemerge doing something fabulous and still connecting people through scholarship and research and strategic thinking and planning. So this best days are ahead of us.
Thank you, Shawn. I have to tell you, I didn't know that people were blowing up Mort's phone beyond me and Goldie.
Goldie is a great texter also. And it's funny. I'll tell you a quick aside to that. I don't know if you even know Sean. Goldie's a very dear friend of our family, Goldie Hawn. And we had our grandkids here like a week ago for some event, and we forgot to buy them Legos. And so, do you know that Walmart can take an order at 10 o'clock in the morning and have it to you at 6 o'clock in the next? I mean, 10 o'clock at night and have it to you the next morning. So we ordered Legos from Walmart's overnight. Ironically, the same time I was doing that, my dear friend Goldie was having dinner with Alice Walton, who owns a Walmart's. So I get to go on the phone and order stuff, and she gets to have dinner with the world's richest woman. So I know my place, Layla.
So let's talk about transition, Shawn. You stepped out, I guess, semi-retired. I don't know.
We call that, yeah, the professional term is being repurposed.
Right.
So you decided to be repurposed. I'm curious, how has that break shaped your entry?
Oh man, it has dramatically shaped it. I left the superintendency at 45. So I still had plenty of time to work. And things to do, and I wasn't quite ready. But I had the wonderful opportunity to go to Fordham University when I left Nashville, and I flew back and forth every week between Fordham and Nashville, which was fun. I mean, it was an adventure. But then, when the opportunity came to go to Howard University and be on the tenure track, and then also support the Urban Superintendent's Academy, following the great Dr. Joe Harrison, as we said. And I just thought, what an honor, and what a responsibility, and what tremendous shoes to fill. I don't know if you could ever fill those shoes. You could wear a pair similar, but you're not going to fill those exact shoes, right? But I think that the 6 years away, really gave me time to reflect. I was at a recent event with a number of aspiring superintendents, and they asked me, what life lesson would I give them? And I told them, I think, one of the greatest life lessons is to reflect deeply upon the mistakes you've made and grow from them. And I think I've had 6 years, to reflect, to really focus on, research about, equity in education, and what can we do, to ensure, that those children who have been most vulnerable and most marginalized, what would it take to kind of accelerate their performance, and then just thinking about leadership in general. And so I didn't have the strain or challenges of the pandemic, as a superintendent. So, I come back in while everybody's tired. I'm pretty fresh. Like, hey, let's get out, let's run. What are you doing? Because I've had 6 years of kind of rest and healing here, and so you come back with a renewed spirit, and you also come back with respect for the job. I would say, it's a tough job. And when you're in it the first time, I guess it's like when you're a heavyweight boxer and you get that first real hard hit and you're in it and you're like, ooh, that hurt. You step out, the bell rings, you regroup. But when you go back in the second round, you know what that pain feels like now. This guy hits really hard. So don't go to the left because you might get hit. You got a totally different perspective.
Hey, Shawn, this is your third superintendency, right?
Yes, number 3, yes.
Yeah. And it's been an illustrious career in the time that we worked together when you were at the Urban Superintendent's Academy. There was a time where I remember the slides so well, and you pushed us hard, and I'm wondering where you still are. You talked about transformative leadership and transformational leadership, but I'm just wondering if you're still reflecting about those differences and what advice you'd give to folks across the country.
Yeah, I think when you talk about transformative leadership, I mean that's more in the inspirational realm, trying to get people together. But when you talk about transformation, I mean you're really locking into social justice and how, looking and not being unapologetic about really, putting an emphasis on making things right for those who have been historically marginalized and having the moral courage to speak up in moments like we're in today. Like, look, we're in a moment today nationally where we hear people saying like these crazy things, like, don't pay attention to diversity, don't diversity of all types, religious diversities, sexual orientation, racial diversity, socioeconomic diversity. They're just saying, let's just be colorblind and just blind to it all and treat everybody equally. And, those of us that know how foolish that concept is, if we're really going to impact the children that are in front of us, I need to speak up about it. I mean, we don't have to go, chasing things down, but let's, when in these roles, having the moment to speak up and do what's right, speak your truth and be unapologetic about it.
Shawn, let me draw from that, because I agree with you entirely that this idea of being colorblind, whether it's to my white face or to anybody else's, doesn't respect the individual, doesn't respect who they are, what, the life experiences that they had. It is wrong. I agree with you entirely. And when we look at our country needing transformation, we are at this point, this pivotal, important point, this flex point in America, where so many are marginalized, left behind, in spite of great efforts by many over decades. I've been around longer than either of you, and I've seen good efforts from good people, and we haven't made that transformation, although we've spoken about it for a very long time.
Yes. Yeah, one of the biggest challenges we have, I mean, are the politics. I mean, it's hard sometimes to be your authentic self in these roles. My time at Howard, I spent time looking at the experiences of Black superintendents in America, for example. And many of us were pushed to assimilate, to not talk about some of the trauma that exists when you push against a power structure that's not used to you being at the table and not used to sometimes the different perspectives that come in. And, we can't be afraid to deal with that challenge. We can't be afraid that if our tenures, end because we're trying to do the right thing, I think there comes a point where, and that's where the transformative leadership comes in, is you've just got to have the moral courage to say, I didn't get this far to worry about what happens if I lose my job. Like, I can go back, I can be a teacher, I can create a job, I can do something. But what I'm going to do is be true to myself. And, I think many of us, we try to hold on to the very thing that's making us sick, and we we beg, we plead, we try to adjust just to keep a job, when sometimes God might be putting that rumbling in our spirit, putting that chaos in our life, because he's signaling to us it's time for us to change and to step forward and go forth. And it's a matter of, do you have the faith not to be afraid? Like, do you trust yourself enough to, when I leave this job, I can go do something else, bigger and better, and or find, equally or more joy than what I had. But it's a matter of mindset. It's a matter of mindset. But I tell people, you didn't go to school to get a bachelor's, a master's, a doctorate to be controlled by a system. You went to be free. Right? I mean, the ultimate goal, I think, of any education is to be liberated, right? To be free to pursue your happiness and the happiness of, people you want to serve. And, many leaders, I think, miss an opportunity to find their true calling because they get locked in to their good government job. They just they try to hold on to it for dear life, at the expense of their health, at the expense of their family, at the expense of really making an imprint on this world.
Shawn, even if you were to hold on to who you are as a person and be true to yourself and not bend to the political winds, there's still a question about, what do you do for those kids who are marginalized, who are underrepresented, who are left behind? And I think that's the great American struggle when we look at, what is it, every southern state has a majority of its kids living in poverty. And when we look at that, education has a role, has a responsibility, and there's something about, we haven't figured it out yet, in spite of wonderful people like Shawn Joseph or Layla Newland. So you've held true to yourself, but there must be a frustrating side to that also.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, martyrdom isn't a strategy, not a successful one, right? So you can go in there and be true to yourself, but if you don't pay attention to the political construct and to the power construct, you will die, and they will put someone in your place who will understand the rules and norms that are expected, and expect you to and expect the status quo to be maintained. But I do so. But in the flip regard, I do think you've got to figure out, once you get there, how do you make things better than they were when you found them? Like, I can tell you, in my 3 years in Nashville, it was short, and I wish I had much more time there. But in the 3 years I was there, I mean, our reading and math scores grew faster than the state and nation. We doubled the amount of kids taking APIB dual enrollment courses. We cut suspensions in half. I think we got about $24 million in grants to start whole school magnets. We added gifted and talented programs to all of our schools instead of just the schools in the richest parts of town. So you can walk away and say it was short, but we did the right thing. And more importantly, I think the last thing I did before I left was we adjusted our Title I designations to make sure that our neediest schools got more dollars, which ultimately resulted in the systems, continued to success. So you still can do good in a short time, and with the Urban Superintendent's Academy, I mean, in our time together over those 5 years, I mean, we had 24 people that came through our program get into superintendencies, and there were people even before that there. And so the lessons you learned, you can bestow upon others and expand and have a greater impact in just in a different way. My bishop in Nashville said to me, so you thought you were coming to Nashville to help these 84,000 kids. But, God would have it, you came to carry the cross, to gain the wisdom to help others.
Shawn, I want to make an analogy, and then later I'll let you in. But you could tell Shawn and I had been around for a while with each other. There was a time which I look back on fondly because it was a good exchange between the two of us, where we asked students in the Urban Academy to create a playlist. You remember that whole question? And the songs were really interesting, different than my list and your list. And we ended up exchanging and said, okay, it's okay. We respect each other. So we got to listen. But I bet you, I don't even if you know, our daughter is a classical musician, and we wrote a book on music.
Wow.
And I interviewed Greg Hutchings about leadership in music and the spiritual nature of it. I've never gone to church for a long time, and music drew him back to church. And now he goes every morning.
Yes.
And so I have this image that we created for the book, and I'm curious if you see the leadership, the role of the superintendent or a principal like this. It's like this remarkable conductor standing on stage with his back to the audience, lifting her hands or his hands. He gets quiet. And when you look out, there's all the teachers and the parents and the principals and the custodians and the bus drivers, and the conductor lowers her baton. And wonderful music plays.
Yes.
That's the ideal. And I've often seen great leaders like you of holding the baton.
Yes. Yes. I told my cabinet recently that, our job is to create the conditions for kids to live out their wildest dreams. We create the conditions. We fight the fight to allow great things to happen. Just like the conductor, they set the tone, they keep you on track. They understand all the different pieces that are coming together to make it all work. Does everybody just play your part? And I'll make sure we bring it together.
So one more piece to that. Layla, I didn't want to get, but I just one more piece because I saw a post, I guess it was on Facebook or somewhere today or yesterday, about family engagement.
Yes.
And so here's another stretch. So you're raising your baton as a remarkable superintendent, and families, the communities to your back. But you have to have a certain amount of trust and engagement to trust that people aren't going to throw tomatoes at you.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious about this commitment that you've made so clear in Prince George's County to family engagement, how that all fits together with your view of education.
Yeah, on the very first day, on June 27th, when I came into Prince George's County and we had a press conference, I told them the very first initiative that we must take on is bringing families back into our school system, but showing families that we truly want to partner and that we'd have to work together to collectively define what real partnership means and looks like. Because what I know is you cannot have a great school system without parents supporting you. We need parents in the buildings to get the kids there, to keep them inspired, to help them with nourishment, to give them the encouragement that they need to be successful. And because we have very high standards, and it takes collective effort. And I think many districts, attempt to do it alone, and they don't really define what they mean when they say parent engagement, and they don't kind of lay out, this is our value system as it relates to families. This is how you should be treated. Like I believe our families should be treated like you experience walking into Nordstrom's. Very attention to detail. How can we serve you? There's never a no. We want you to be 100% satisfied, and we will work to the best of our ability to get you what you say you wanted. and I think when families truly feel that, like when they feel we genuinely see them, we genuinely want to understand what they want from us, and we actively work, I think that there's beauty that happens. I mean, you see, because a kid won't act crazy if he knows when I call mom, oh no, she's gonna be on my teacher's side, because she knows we've got a level of trust and respect that if the teacher's taking the time to call me, there's a problem that we need to solve. you know, and we've just we've got to do that. All parents have hopes and dreams for their children. Regardless of where they come from, regardless of socioeconomic status or background, they have hopes and dreams for them. The question becomes: are we listening deeply enough, and working to show them, well, we're going to be a partner with you to help get your children there.
This is a hard time for families in this region, Shawn. The DMV area, I don't know what your experience has been, but I've found it quite interesting over the past few months being on the road. And those who are living outside of the region aren't feeling the kind of doom in the air that those of us living in the DMV area are feeling with the federal layoffs and understanding that there's so much job loss in our regional economy and uncertainty. There's speculation about the housing market, right? There's a ripple effect that everybody's bracing for about what happens in the region. And so, as we talk about families engaging and we talk about, I'm going to kind of layer this against your feeling burnt out and needing to recharge to be your best self. It's great that you're bringing this energy, but I would imagine you're surrounded by a lot of folks who are burnt out. And how do you think about meeting people where they are right now at this moment in time, and how is it shaping and just influencing the way that you go out into the community and what you're seeing in the community now versus maybe what the community would have been like a few years ago before you entered?
Yeah, no, we were intentional, about getting out and just listening deeply. Like, we had 20 listening and learning sessions within our community, and even now we have been very sensitive, because in Prince George's County, I mean, we've got over 100,000 families or more that we know have been laid off, or the federal shutdown has had a disproportionate effect on Prince George's County, as we've had a large part of our population is in that workforce. And so, we have been listening and being intentional, about ensuring that our families can eat. Just basic food has become a big issue for us here. So we've made sure families understand, that they can complete, free and reduced meals forms at any time of the year. We've opened up and worked with food pantries and increased the food pantry access to schools. We have had lots of job fairs specifically for federal workers here. And, a recent one, I guess about 2 weeks ago, we had over 450 people, coming out to learn how to be a substitute teacher in the district. And we also talked about other job opportunities that are here, because we know, we have to be intentional and there are real needs that need to be met in our community. But this is where, we have a position called parent engagement assistants in our district. They're on the ground at schools connecting with families, and they work up with our communications office. So we've made intentional efforts to convene those wonderful employees that we have to just hear the stories of what's happening in different parts of the community, so we can be responsive, to the changing needs there. And I think parents appreciate that, that they see we're responding to their current reality. But it is very hard. And on top of that, I mean, we've got, issues with ICE here. as 40% of Prince George's County public schools is Hispanic and Latino speaking, Spanish speaking. And we've got a lot of other immigrant populations here, but we're over 40% immigrant population as a school system. And so the fears that are out there, the real stories that we hear about, children who are coming home and their parents have had engagement with ICE and are real. And we just have to be responsive. We try to be positive in our communications, understanding, and the realities that why kids are coming late, why kids aren't showing up, and following up and trying to understand, so we can make connections. But yeah, this is a dark moment that we're in right now. But we know no night lasts forever. Night comes, and hopefully it goes. We've got to, that's the good news about it. But in this moment, we just have to, stand together, hold one another a little closer, and just work collectively to get through it.
What's your message to teachers who are seeing all this going on in the community, are recognizing that the kids' lives have changed and the families' lives have changed, not just from Prince George's County, but clearly there is more of an impact in the rest of the country? Layla used the term burnt out before. Teachers must be exhausted in the classroom. So how do you sustain their energy when every time, they just want to close the door and say, let me be with my children. That's what I really want. It must be so hard for those teachers in the classroom and the principals to support them. So what are you doing for those folks?
Yeah, we have 22,000 employees, and about 12,000 of them are teachers. And, one of the things I've been doing actually since the first week is I write a message every Monday to all 22,000 employees. And I've been consistent since we've started, just to help them understand. One, I hear and understand what they're going through. Within that weekly message that I send out, quite often I put in a Google link that they can click, and they can share anything that they think I should know. So I get that directly. My communications team, collects it, and then they'll give me the full report on it. So I read every message. I go back. I respond to individual teachers because their emails will be on there, things of that nature. I think this is a moment where we have to increase communications internally. And as superintendent, one of the things I recognize is one of my most important stakeholders are my internal stakeholders. And now in this time, I've got to make sure they're well, because they're taking on, it drains you to take on the additional burdens of others while you're trying to do, your work. And they're coming in and they're asked to do so much more than just teach the math class. They've got to now be part counselor, part food provider, part communicator, part social worker. And so speaking to them weekly and having access so they can hear weekly, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? Where are we going as a system? Is really important. And I've gotten more positive feedback from that action than anything I've done thus far. And, and I'm not afraid to just put it out there, kind of what I'm thinking, ask them how they're doing, and just work. We had I was an author this year on the upcoming AASA Decennial Study. And Mort, I know you've had the opportunity to write a chapter on that in previous editions. And this year, my task was to analyze the data that was related to how community engagement has changed since 2020. And, we're going to have the report come out in a few weeks. But it's changed dramatically, since the pandemic, and for all demographic groups, rural, suburban, and urban districts, the expectation for increased communication since the pandemic has been clear. And in this moment right now, I think superintendents are recognizing that we need new methods of connecting and listening and bringing people together, because we've become so much more divided, as a country in recent years, which means from the superintendent's perspective, you've got to lead through listening, because you're going to have, particularly in our suburban communities, which tend to be much more ideologically diverse. You've got very different perspectives, and you've got to figure out how to bring people to the table, listen, and try to build consensus and build a sense of civility that has seemed to, dissipate over the past few years.
Shawn, can we pull on something here? It's interesting. I think about what this study is going to reveal, that communication has shifted. People want more communication, which I find incredibly fascinating. So I'm going to put my parent hat on for a minute. Having 3 kids, public school aged, I get a lot of stuff sent to me, right?
Yeah.
It's pushed out communication, whether, there was an event at the school or, there was a medical emergency. We just want you to be aware before, right? But this is against the backdrop of lots of data that tells us that people are more disconnected today than we have been. So we're connected to devices. We say we want more communication, and yet we're disconnected. And I would argue it's that disconnection that is creating the division, right? That we are so far apart from feeling connected to each other. People don't look at each other. People are less aware of personal space because they're focused on their phone, or they have their AirPods in when they're walking around outside, right? So I think there's this interesting dilemma when we talk about school district communication, because what I see as a parent is a lot of pushing out of communication, but that doesn't really facilitate connection, right?
No.
Like, that's information
Yes.
outreach. So I'm just curious, does that resonate with you?
No, it
How are
does.
you thinking about that?
Yeah, no. Connection is a two-way street, right? And the more connection, the less correction. And
I like that.
yeah. So I've worked hard. So my listening sessions were just that. Like, they were me showing up, and it's been amazing. Like, we engaged over 2,000 families. Like, hundreds of families came out to meetings, both online and even in person, like hundreds. And I spent hours. I think they just had somebody there who wasn't trying to sell anything, wasn't going back and forth. I just wanted to listen. I wanted to listen and just truly understand your perspective. Like, just put your qualitative, researcher hat on and say, here, let me listen deeply and just hear about your experiences. And I think people appreciated that. So I agree. You can tune out the push out, but I think when people know that there are spaces that are created for authentic two-way dialogue and follow-up, then and they feel like their voice is heard, and they see response, they react. So, like, just today I announced today that we're pushing out dashboards. The story of Prince George's County has always been, Prince George's County is a challenging district. It's one of the lowest performing districts in the state of Maryland. It's large. It's the 17th largest district in the country. But it was always, it seems to me, looked at from a deficit model. Well, we, coming in, I spoke to my research team and said, let's stop comparing our kids to, all other kids in the nation. Why don't we look at how our kids are performing? Let's do some statistical analyses to identify what 1 year of expected growth should look like for them wherever they come from. And let's answer the question, did they make that growth? Yes or no? And let's figure that out in math and reading, and communicate that to parents, that we're paying attention, though we know that there's a proficiency standard that's set by the state. What we care about is, are our kids making adequate growth? Yes or no? right? So you're a sixth grader that comes into this Prince George's County, but you're reading on the second grade level when you get here. So you're 4 grade levels behind to start. The likelihood of you achieving proficiency is probably slim, right? But we don't want to. But we can't just let the story be doom and gloom. You didn't make proficiency. I want to know, did you grow, and how much did you grow? So if you grew from second grade to fourth grade, then we should be celebrating that. So yes, you didn't make proficiency, but there's another narrative there in that data. You grew. And so when we did that, it just changed the narrative. So I said, what I can say in Prince George's County with confidence is that kids are making adequate growth on average. But the challenge is, because we have many complex kids who are behind for a multitude of reasons. Again, 40% of our kids are immigrant students who English is not their first language, and so they have to learn the language and things. We have to be obsessed with growth and monitoring, are we growing? And if we are, now we're not, this isn't a story where we're coming in saying we have to remediate kids, because our kids are growing. The question becomes now, how do we lock in on first instruction and accelerate? And to accelerate, you need accelerants. And then what are the accelerants that we're putting in the system? It's a different way to look at the work. And it doesn't just keep you in this sense of, oh, woe is us, because somebody said on some artificial assessment standard we're not meeting proficiency. We're growing. And we're going to celebrate that story and tell that story.
Shawn, we're just about out of time, Layla and Shawn. I want to give Shawn a chance to wrap up, and Layla, I want to give you a chance to say goodbye to at least this one podcast. I want to give you the final word. So, Shawn, I just want you to know that 2002, superintendent in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, I had a superintendent's advisory group, and I was ready to post on all the walls, all the student data. And my students yelled at me, literally, sort of like, what are you going to do? How do you think we're going to feel when you put that stuff on the wall? And they came up with the plan. The students, the high school students said, show us the growth, make us feel good about what we're accomplishing. And boy, what a lesson in terms of listening to students and to teachers and to parents, rather than saying, oh, I'm going to show the community all the test scores and I'm going to be transparent. Well, you could finish the second half of this where the kid said to me, bull, right? So, so let me, this is a now what, so what, and then I'm going to let Leo wrap us up. But, you are such an inspiring, positive person.
Oh, thank you.
And so the now what, so what is, do you feel positive and inspiring for the next 20 years you're going to be service in education? Do you feel good about potential, possibilities, and promise of American education?
I do. So like I'm 51 right now. So
that's why I said 20. I'm just kind of.
So this is my 30th year in education this year. So I see myself in K-12 education. Like Prince George's will be my last superintendency for certain. But then once that's done, I see myself going back into the university world. I'm optimistic that we still have good people that understand and will answer the call to public education. And I'm still optimistic that we have families that appreciate that we live in a country that does provide an education to every child who sets foot, on our ground. I mean, that is a blessing. I'm not so optimistic about how different states will handle issues of funding and adequacy and student rights. I think some states will get it right. Some states will not. We're a country that has focused more on economics and personal, wealth than the success of the greater good. But I am optimistic that there'll always be good people who are striving to do the right thing, and they'll always, it doesn't take everybody to be on board. It just takes a group of committed people that can change the world, and so I'm optimistic that we'll be amongst the people fighting to change the world.
Thank you, Shawn. Layla, I want you to know it's been an honor to work with you. We started our podcast with Aaron Spence and end with Shawn Joseph. What remarkable bookends of experience and commitment. Two great, great leaders. And in between, we've spoken to psychologists and superintendents and CAOs and just a whole broad range of those committed to the work and feel the same optimism that Shawn feels. And I think the work you've done at Ed Elements and whatever your next venture is will bring that spirit forward. So I want you to know on a personal level, it's just truly been wonderful. I hope we can get you back as a guest, not as a co-host, or maybe as a co-host in the future. But I want to thank you for starting these podcasts and for bringing in remarkable leaders for us to talk to.
Mort, thank you. Well, it's interesting, Shawn, hearing you talk about knowing when it's time to move on and knowing when it's time to do something different. The stars aligned for us to have this conversation as I close the show out with Mort today. And so my takeaway, and, this is the final variable that I'll contribute to the change equation, is reframing the narrative. So when we're driving change and everybody gets focused on the barriers and the frustrations and what we're not doing and what's not going right, a part of leadership through change is reframing that narrative. And so I really appreciate everything that you shared today. I am going to have some free time in the coming months, so I'm going to pay you a visit and bring you some coffee.
But remember, if you focus on your mission, you'll always have a job. If you focus on your job, you might miss your mission.
I love that, Shawn. Thank you so much. Well, the next time I see you, I'm going to give you a great big hug to thank you for these parting
give
words.
Him a
It
hug.
means a lot
Give
to
her
me.
a hug from me too, would you please?
I will. I will, Mort. I will. Well, Shawn, I will text you and we're going to make sure that we get together in the coming weeks. For our audience, it's been a privilege having these conversations. Mort, thank you so much for being such a dear friend and collaborator on this. And I know this is closing out a project, but I know that there are other projects ahead of us, and I'm excited about that.
Thank you. Thank you, Shawn.
Thank you so much.